fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
Last thing I remembered was the blinding, sterile white of headlights and the metallic crunch of a universe collapsing. It was the sound of my own ending, a mundane tragedy, a tired driver, a rainy Tuesday, a woman crossing the street. I expected the void. I expected fire or pearly gates or perhaps just the infinite, silent dark of non-existence. Instead, I was bobbing. A gentle, rhythmic swaying dominated my new reality. I had no hands to inspect, no legs to kick. I felt light. Impossible, unmoored, and terrifyingly buoyant. My vision was a fish-eyed distortion of crimson hues, the world viewed through a curved, translucent red filter. I tried to scream, to ask where I was, but I had no lungs. My voice was trapped inside a spherical prison, reverberating only as a dull internal vibration. What is this? The silent shriek of a thought echoed in my prison as I panicked, thrashing, which only resulted in me spinning wildly on a vertical axis. I was tethered. A thin golden thread anchored me to a heavy mahogany desk cluttered with parchment and strange, smoking vials. I was a balloon, a goddamned red balloon. The absurdity of it threatened to shatter whatever consciousness I had left. I had died and been reincarnated as Party Dacre. But the air inside me, no, the gas did not feel inert. It felt alive. It pulsed with a strange, static energy that prickled against my thin skin. The sound tore through the silence of the dusty, stone-walled room. My attention, or the front-facing curve of my sphere, snapped toward the noise. Perched atop a bookshelf filled with leather-bound grimoires was a monkey, but not a zoo monkey. This thing was a nightmare of matted fur, glowing green eyes, and vestigial bat wings. It chattered, bearing needle-like teeth, its gaze locked onto me. It knew what I was. It knew I was fragile. It leaped. The creature landed on the desk, scattering quills and ink. It bounded toward me, claws extended, screeching that unholy sound again. Fear spiked, hot and instantaneous, but then came something else, indignation. I had lived a life of caution, paying taxes and looking both ways, only to be flattened by a truck. And now in the afterlife I was about to be popped by a demonic primate. A single, defiant thought solidified in the chaos. No, immense rage filled my helium. It was not just anger, it was a physical expansion. The gas inside me heated, turning volatile. The molecules vibrated with violent intent. As the monkey swiped its claw at my delicate red skin, I did not pop, I pushed back. A shockwave of static electricity, blue and crackling, exploded from my surface. It was not a biological defense, it was raw, unrefined magic. The monkey shrieked, blasted backward by the concussion. It slammed into a stack of books, smoke rising from its singed fur. Enough. The voice was deep, a baritone rumble that vibrated through my tether and straight into my core. The heavy oak door of the study swung open and a man stepped in. He was massive. That was my first thought. He wore robes of midnight blue, open at the chest to reveal pale skin scarred by what looked like lightning burns. His hair was long, dark, and tied back carelessly, framing a face that was severe, angular, and currently twisted in annoyance. He marched to the desk, grabbing the dazed monkey by the scruff of its neck and tossing it unceremoniously into a cage in the corner. Then he turned his storm-gray eyes on me. He loomed over the desk, smelling of ozone and old paper. He leaned in close, his face distorted through my red curvature. "A defensive ward," he muttered, his voice dropping to a velvety rasp. I did not program a defensive ward into the containment sphere. He reached out, his fingers long and calloused. I flinched, or tried to. I bobbed away from his touch, the static inside me still humming. He froze, his eyes narrowed, intelligent and dangerous. "It moved," he whispered, "not by the draft," it recoiled. He circled the desk, his gaze intense, stripping me bare. Did the soul trap actually work? Did I catch a stray wind spirit? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a long silver needle. The tip glinted in the candlelight. "Only one way to find out," he said, bringing the needle toward my skin. "If you're just trapped gas, you will dissipate. If you are something else, well, this is going to hurt." The needle moved closer. I screamed a silent, desperate plea, my internal pressure rising to a critical point. "Stop," I projected the thought with every ounce of willpower I possessed. The rage inside my helium core flared white-hot, and the red skin of my spherical body glowed with sudden, blinding luminosity. The man, the mage, halted the needle an inch from my surface. He hissed, shielding his eyes with a forearm as the room bathed in crimson light. "Sentience," he breathed, the word a mixture of awe and horror. He lowered the needle, though he did not put it away. "And telepathy, no, empathic projection." He stepped closer, ignoring the heat radiating from me. "Who are you?" I could not speak, I could only feel. I focused on my frustration, my confusion, and my desperate need to not be destroyed. I bobbed forward, bumping gently against his chest. The contact sent a shiver through my containment. His body was solid, warm, and thrumming with a power that resonated with the gas inside me. He did not pull away. Tentatively, he raised a hand and cupped the side of my sphere. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his thumb stroking the smooth, taut surface. "You are not a wind spirit," he murmured, his gray eyes softening, the storm within them calming. "The resonance is human, heavy, sorrowful." He looked at the chaotic mess on his desk, then back to me. "I am Kaelen, High Aeromancer of the Spire. I created this vessel to hold volatile storm essences. I did not intend to snare a wandering soul." Kaelen, the name tasted like iron and rain in my mind. For the next few hours, a strange, silent dialogue formed between us. He sat in his leather chair, the needle forgotten on the desk, and he spoke to me. He asked yes or no questions, and I learned to answer. A spin left for no, a spin right for yes. "Are you from this world?" he asked. I spun left, his eyes widened slightly. "Another plane." I spun right. He paused, his expression turning grave. "Did you die?" I spun right again, a slow, melancholy rotation that seemed to drain the very light from the room. Kaelen dragged a hand down his face, looking weary. The movement pulled the fabric of his robe tighter across his shoulders, highlighting the raw power coiled in his frame. He was a beautiful, terrifying creature, living in a tower of stone and silence, and I was a balloon tethered to his desk. "This form cannot hold you, spirit," he said, his voice low and grave. "The membrane is silk woven with stabilization spells, but it degrades when exposed to the complexity of a human soul. You are too heavy, too vibrant." As if to punctuate his words, a sharp pain lanced through me. My vision blurred. A tiny hiss of escaping gas sounded from near the knot of my tether. I panicked, thrashing against the string. I felt myself deflating, the edges of my consciousness fraying like old rope. The room began to dim. Kaelen stood up so abruptly his chair tipped over. "Damn it, the seal is breaching." He scooped me up, untying the tether with nimble, frantic fingers. He held me in his hands, pressing his palms against my sides to hold the pressure in. The contact was intimate, visceral. I could feel the pulse in his wrists, the heat of his blood. "I will not let you dissipate into the ether," he growled, his jaw set in a hard line. "I caught you. You are mine to save." He strode toward a heavy iron door at the back of the study, kicking it open. "I have to transfer you now. It will require a blood binding. It is forbidden magic, but I will not let a soul under my roof vanish into nothingness." I felt my essence leaking, my thoughts becoming scattered. "Help me," I projected, the thought a wave of cold fear. "Stay with me," Kaelen commanded, his voice shaking the very air. "Focus on my voice. Focus on the rage you felt earlier. Use it as an anchor." He slammed me down onto a cold stone altar in the center of a dark, circular room. Above us, the ceiling was open to the night sky, stars whirling dizzyingly. "I have no homunculus prepared," he cursed, looking around the empty ritual chamber. His eyes landed on a statue in the corner, a life-sized figure hewn from white marble and conductive silver clay. It was unfinished, a practiced sculpt of a woman, breathless and cold. "It will have to do." He grabbed a ceremonial dagger from the altar. "This is going to violate every law of the High Council," he whispered, looking down at my deflating form. The red film was wrinkling now. I was dying again. He slashed his palm. Blood, dark and rich, welled up. He slammed his bleeding hand onto the marble chest of the statue, then placed his other hand over me. "Translatio animi," he roared to the heavens. The world turned to white fire. The sensation was not like floating, it was like being poured. I was liquid fire, siphoned from the dying balloon and channeled through a conduit of Kaelen's raw magic. I felt his will iron-hard and unyielding, forcing me into a shape that was tight, heavy, and cold. Gravity returned with a vengeance. I gasped. The sound was jagged, tearing through a throat that felt like it was made of sandpaper. Air, real, sweet, freezing air rushed into lungs that had not existed seconds ago. My eyes snapped open. I was not seeing red anymore. I saw the vaulted stone ceiling, the stars, and Kaelen's face hovering above me, pale and sweating. I tried to move, but my limbs felt like lead. They were stone or something close to it. The marble and silver clay were transmuting, softening under the barrage of Kaelen's blood magic, but the process was agonizingly slow. "Easy," Kaelen rasped, his hand still pressed to my chest, right over my heart. "Breathe. You must cycle the mana or the clay will harden again and trap you." I looked down. My body was a pale, pearlescent white, naked and smooth like a statue brought to half-life. Where his blood stained my chest, the skin was turning a flushed pink, living flesh spreading outward from his touch like a blooming flower. Kaelen," I croaked. My voice sounded hollow like wind in a cavern. His eyes widened. "You know my name." "You told me," I managed, the effort of speaking sending tremors through my stiff jaw. He slumped back against the altar, wiping blood from his hand onto his robe. He looked exhausted, drained of color, but his eyes devoured me. "It worked. By the gods, you are exquisite." He was not looking at me like an object. He was looking at me like a miracle. The intensity of his gaze made the newly forming skin on my arms prickle with heat. The sensation of having a body again was overwhelming. The cold stone beneath my back, the smell of metallic blood and ozone, the thumping of a heart that beat in sync with his. "Can you sit?" he asked softly. I tried. My abdominal muscles stiff, protested, but I managed to leverage myself up. I was nude, vulnerable, but the air around me seemed to wrap me in a protective embrace, likely Kaelen's doing. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek. The stone there had turned to flesh. "Warm," he whispered. "I have sculpted life from the ether." A strange tension hung between us. He was my creator in a sense and my savior. I was a stranger from another world inhabiting a body he had carved. The power dynamic was immense, yet his touch was trembling. "I was Elara," I said, testing the name. It felt right to say it aloud. "Elara," he repeated, the syllables rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "Welcome to the spire, Elara." He leaned in, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. The air between us crackled, charged with the residual energy of the ritual and something far more primal. My new heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted him to close the distance. I wanted to feel something other than the cold memory of the void. Boom. The heavy iron door to the ritual chamber buckled inward. Kaelen spun around, placing himself between me and the door, his hand lighting up with a wreath of crackling lightning. "The council," he hissed, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. "They sensed the blood magic." The door exploded inward, showering the room with shrapnel. Through the smoke, 3 figures emerged, mages draped in crimson robes, their faces hidden behind golden masks. "Kaelen of the Spire," a voice echoed, distorted and metallic. "You have breached the laws of life. Surrender the abomination, and your death will be swift." Kaelen looked back at me over his shoulder. I was barely mobile, my legs still heavy with the stiffness of clay. I was naked, weaponless, and terrified. "She is no abomination," Kaelen snarled, the air pressure in the room dropping so sharply my ears popped. "And if you want her, you will have to burn this tower to the ground." One of the crimson mages raised a staff. A ball of green fire coalesced at the tip. "So be it." The green fire hurtled toward us. Kaelen did not flinch. He thrust his hand forward, and a wall of compressed air slammed into the fireball, detonating it in midair. The heat washed over us, but Kaelen's barrier held. "Can you move?" he shouted over the roar of the flames. "My legs, they're too heavy," I cried, trying to slide off the altar. The transmutation had not finished reaching my feet. They were still solid marble, fused to the floor. "Damn it," Kaelen cursed. He unleashed a whip of lightning that caught the lead mage in the chest, sending him flying back into the corridor. But the other 2 were advancing, chanting a unison spell that made the very foundations of the tower shake. I watched Kaelen fight. He was a conductor of violence, his movements precise and brutal. But he was one against 3 high-level mages, and he was exhausted from the ritual. He took a hit, a shard of ice to the shoulder, and stumbled. "Kaelen," I screamed. The sight of his blood, fresh, red blood, triggered something in me. That familiar swelling sensation, the pressure, the rage. It filled my new lungs, hotter and more potent than it had ever been inside the balloon. I was not just a soul anymore. I was a soul inhabiting a body made of conductive silver clay and aeromancy. I did not need helium. I needed to scream. I drew in a breath that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. I focused on the intruders, on the threat to the man who had pulled me from the void. I let it out. It was not a normal scream. It was a sonic boom. A shockwave of pure white sound erupted from my lips. It shattered the remaining marble on my legs, freeing me. It blasted past Kaelen, ruffling his robes, and hit the 2 mages with the force of a freight train. Their shields shattered. They were thrown backward, their bodies limp ragdolls, crashing into the stone walls with bone-breaking force. Silence fell, heavy and ringing. Kaelen stood amidst the debris, chest heaving, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He turned slowly to look at me. I stood on the altar, the last of the marble flaking off my skin like dead scales. I was fully flesh now, glowing softly in the starlight, my chest rising and falling with adrenaline. "You," Kaelen stared, his eyes wide, pupils blown. "You wield the voice of the gale. That is a lost magic." I stepped down from the altar. My legs wobbled, unused to walking, and I stumbled forward. Kaelen caught me, his good arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him. The contact was electric. His robes were rough against my sensitive new skin, his body hard and radiating heat. "You saved me," he whispered into my hair. "You saved me first," I replied, looking up into his storm-gray eyes. The danger had passed, but the adrenaline remained, morphing into a different kind of hunger. We were both breathing hard, alive on the edge of death. He looked down at me, his gaze dropping to my lips, then to the curve of my neck and lower. He made no move to cover me. "The clay," he murmured, his voice rough. "It needs heat to set the transmutation permanently, body heat." I knew it was a half-truth. The magic had done its work, but neither of us cared about the technicalities of spellwork right now. "Then warm me," I challenged, my hands coming up to grip the lapels of his robe. Kaelen groaned, a low sound in his throat that vibrated against my chest. He lowered his head, his lips crashing onto mine. It was not a tentative first kiss. It was a collision. It was possessive and starving. He tasted of copper and ozone. his hand tangled in my hair, tilting my head back to deepen the kiss, while his other arm held me tight against him, as if afraid I would float away again. I was not floating, I was grounded. I was heavy with desire and life. He broke the kiss, gasping, his forehead resting against mine. "The council will return, we have to leave the spire." "I know," I whispered, running my thumb over the scar on his cheek. "But not tonight," he growled, sweeping me up into his arms, bridal style. "Tonight I finish what I started. I need to know that you are real, every inch of you." He carried me out of the ruined ritual chamber, stepping over the unconscious bodies of our enemies, heading toward the winding stairs that led to his private quarters. I had died in a collision of metal and rain. I had floated in a red haze. But as Kaelen carried me into the darkness, his heart beating thunder against my own, I knew my life, my real life, was just beginning.